Hello, everyone. Guess who's back? Yes, it is I. And I have a love story that I would like to read for you today. It is not a short story. It is a little bit longer, and it is not one of the 50 famous people. So I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, I shall begin. Charlotte's Ladies by Lucy Maud Montgomery, written in 1911. Just as soon as dinner was over at the asylum, Charlotte sped away to the gap in the fence, the northwest corner gap. There was a gap in the southeast corner, too. The asylum fence was in a rather poor condition, but the southeast gap was interesting only after tea, and it was never at any time quite as interesting as the northwest gap. Charlotte had discovered the gap only a week before. They had not been there in the autumn, but the snowdrifts had lain heavily against the fence all winter. And one spring day, when Charlotte was creeping through the shrubbery in the northwest corner in search of the little yellow daffodils that always grew there in the spring, she found a delightful space where a board had fallen off, whence she could look out on a bit of woodsy road with a little footpath winding along by the fence under the wide-spreading boughs of the asylum trees. Charlotte felt a wild impulse to slip out and run fast and far down that lovely, sunny, tempting, fenceless road. But that would have been wrong, for it was against the asylum rules, and Charlotte, though she hated most of the asylum rules with all of her heart, never disobeyed or broke them. Then, as Charlotte watched, the pretty lady with the blue eyes came along the footpath. Charlotte had never seen her before and hadn't the slightest idea in the world who she was. But that was what she called her as soon as she saw her. The lady was so pretty, with lovely blue eyes that were very sad, although somehow as you looked at them you felt that they ought to be laughing and merry eyes instead. At least Charlotte thought so, and wished at once that she knew how to make them laugh. Besides, the lady had lovely golden hair and the most beautiful pink cheeks, and Charlotte, who had mouse-colored hair and any number of freckles, had an unbounded admiration for golden locks and rose-leaf complexions. The lady was dressed in black, which Charlotte didn't like. When the pretty lady with the blue eyes had gone by, Charlotte drew a long breath.
If I could pick out a mother, I'd pick out one that looked just like her.
Nice things sometimes happen close together, even in an orphan asylum. And that very evening, Charlotte discovered the southeast gap and found herself peering into the most beautiful garden you can imagine. A garden where daffodils and tulips grew in great ribbon-like beds, and there were hedges of white and purple lilacs, and winding paths under blossoming trees. It was such a garden as Charlotte had pictured in happy dreams and never expected to see in real life. And yet here it had been all the time, divided from her only by a high board fence.
I wouldn't have supposed there could be such a lovely place so near an orphan asylum. It's the very loveliest place I ever saw. Oh, I do wish I could go and walk in it. Well, I do declare, if there isn't a lady in it too.
Charlotte instantly named her the tall lady with the black eyes. She was not nearly so young or so pretty as the lady with the blue eyes, but she looked very kind and jolly.
I'd like her for an aunt, not for a mother. Oh, no, not for a mother, but for an aunt. I know she'd make a splendid aunt. And, oh, just look at her cat.
Very handsome cat, Charlotte called him mentally, seeing the capitals as plainly as if they had been printed out. Charlotte's fingers tingled to stroke his glossy coat, but she folded them sternly together. Charlotte watched the tall lady and the cat until they went away into the fine, big house further up the garden. Then she sighed and went back through the cherry trees to the asylum playground. Charlotte never missed being at the gaps at the proper times if she could possibly manage it, and her heart was full of dreams about her two ladies. But the other orphans thought all the fun had gone out of her, and the matron noticed her absent-mindedness and dosed her with sulfur and molasses. Oh, that sounds terrible. Charlotte took the dose meekly, as she took everything else. It was all part and parcel with being an orphan in an asylum.
But if the pretty lady with the blue eyes was my mother, she wouldn't make me swallow such dreadful stuff. I don't believe even the tall lady with the black eyes would. Although perhaps she might, aunts not being quite as good as mothers.
For that very day, a wonderful thing happened at noon hour by the Northwest Gap. Charlotte had always been very careful not to let the pretty lady see her, but today, after the pretty lady had gone past, Charlotte leaned out of the gap to watch her as far as she could. And just at that very moment, the pretty lady looked back. The pretty lady smiled right down at Charlotte, and for just a moment her eyes looked as Charlotte had always known they ought to look. Charlotte was feeling rather frightened down in her heart, but she smiled bravely back.
"Are you thinking of running away?"
said the pretty lady, and oh, what a sweet voice she had. Sweet and tender, just like a mother's voice ought to be.
No,
said Charlotte, shaking her head gravely.
I should like to run away, but it would be of no use because there is no place to run to.
"Why would you like to run away? Don't you like living here?"
Why, it's an orphan asylum. Nobody could like living in an orphan asylum, but of course, orphans should be very thankful to have any place to live in, and I am thankful. I'd be thankfuler still if the matron wouldn't make me take sulfur and molasses. If you had a little girl, would you make her take sulfur and molasses?
"I didn't when I had a little girl,"
said the pretty lady wistfully, and her eyes were sad again.
Oh, did you really have a little girl once?
"Yes, and she died."
Oh, I am sorry. Did she have lovely golden hair and pink cheeks like yours?
No, no. She had mouse-colored hair and freckles.
Oh, and weren't you sorry?
No, I was glad of it because it made her look like her father. I've always loved little girls with mouse-colored hair and freckles ever since. Well, I must hurry along.
Of course, Charlotte was at the Gap the next day, and they had a lovely talk. In a week, they were the best of friends. Then another wonderful thing happened.